Deep tech is one of the most ambiguous industries to be a part of when you talk about surety. Why deep tech?
Things like semiconductor is going to become very important. With the use of technology, IT and everything, they built a wonderful product to eliminate scavenging.
How many deals land up in your inbox usually?
Probably, 300 to 500 deals per month. Probably may not build the revenue base to that level, but may become a very good acquisition. The gut is important, but doesn't mean that based on the gut I go and close it. Sometimes FOMO deal का होता है, sometimes sector का भी होता है. See, e-com में आप success stories we all know, but we don't know many who failed.
Is there a bias in the startup ecosystem? Are you people also bullish on AI as an industry, as Seafund?
Yes, so we are looking at it, but we are also careful.
But कितनी बार ऐसा हुआ है कि once you have put in the money, you figure out that this investor, this founder doesn't listen to me at all. Hi guys. Sohail here again. Today we have Manoj sir with us, who's a part of Seafund Ventures. Seafund Ventures एक early stage VC firm है जो कि seed to pre-series A level पे आती है, and they focus a lot on the Deeptech and enterprise B2B tech startups. We have Manoj sir with us, who's the managing partner of Seafund Ventures, and आज का जो podcast है, this is primarily for those who are right now not just building but a little bit ahead, थोड़ा सा fundraising के बारे में सोच रहे हैं या फिर already fundraise कर रहे हैं. The idea here is to get a perspective on how the investor thinks, how do they evaluate deals, and a little bit to understand how Manoj sir evaluates deals and how Seafund Ventures operates as well. Thanks a lot, Manoj sir, for taking time out today and hosting us in your office. कैसा लग रहा है सर? How are things अभी?
First of all, thank you, Sohail, for having me on your podcast. Hello to all your viewers and listeners. It's a pleasure to be on this podcast, and let's have an interesting conversation.
नहीं, absolutely sir. आज का जो podcast है ये इसीलिए special है because I think हमने काफी सारे investors को already interview किया है. बट डीप टेक फोकस्ड इन्वेस्टर्स को हमने अभी तक नहीं किया है. और डीप टेक इसीलिए इंटरेस्टिंग है बिकॉज ये एक ऐसी इंडस्ट्री है जहां पे अर्ली आना और उसमें एक्चुअली में आप इफ बीइंग एबल टू गेट एन आरओआई वेरी डिफिकल्ट बिकॉज ज्यादातर लोग उस इंडस्ट्री में उतना समझते नहीं है उतनी क्लैरिटी से. सो मैं सबसे पहले तो सर आपका थोड़ा सा बैकग्राउंड जानना चाहूंगा. इन जनरल हाउ डिड योर प्रोफेशनल लाइफ बिगिन और आप इन्वेस्टमेंट्स में कैसे आए?
तो ये एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग जर्नी है. मैं कलकत्ता से हूँ. born and brought up in Calcutta. Actually, not Calcutta, in a small town, twin city of Calcutta called Howrah.
हैं?
So,
Bangali.
Sorry, Bangali बोलते हैं पर मुझे but there's been out of touch a bit. So started my journey in Howrah. I went to later part of my schooling was at Don Bosco. Till 12, Don Bosco Lilua to be precise.
Interesting.
And then post that, those were interesting days of growing up in Howrah. Though, since its proximity to Calcutta, we had large city exposure also. Then I moved to Bangalore where I did my engineering from BMS College of Engineering in computer science. But let me tell you, the computer science of those days was very, very different. It was very early days of computer science where new labs were being just set up and Fortran and COBOL and BASIC were the programming.
This is which year?
I passed out in 93.
Passed out in 93?
93, yeah.
उस टाइम तो हम लोग लोगो सीख रहे थे शायद. लेगो नहीं, लोगो ही था ना. लोगो बेसिक. या
तो मतलब Fortran, COBOL, C was
yes.
language, C++ was just coming up. But to be frank, I was not a great programming language guy. I was more an IT infra kind of guy. So I moved back. There were not many jobs here. So I got a support job. I did not take that up and moved back to Calcutta and built a couple of businesses over the next few years with a couple of partners. One was on the IT infra side, where we set up networks for people. I have assembled PCs. Those were days when people were early days of people buying PCs, Windows PCs, and built networks and things like that. And I also set up a multimedia training and development company in partnership with, actually not in partnership, but with some kind of tie-up with the Namtech group from Bangalore. KPP Nambiar, his son was running. He was, I think, Secretary Department of Electronics those days, and his son was running this. And we built these businesses, the multimedia training, because, there's a very good understanding of art and, artistic flavor in Bengal. So while building these companies, the multimedia company, we were able to exit in 99. There was no VC those days, so we were not able to raise enough capital to expand. And the IT infra company was doing pretty well, but in 99, 2000, when the dot-com boom started, I was lured to move to Bangalore, by somebody I knew who was setting up a chain of cyber cafes.
Interesting.
So I had been part of the startup ecosystem on the other side in that journey. We did raise some venture capital, and
This is 96, 97.
this was starting 99, 2000.
Oh, dot-com bust.
Dot-com boom and bust. I saw that. So I built this chain of cyber cafes. We had about 100 of them all in
Wow.
about 8 cities. It was good, it was a good revenue earning model those days, In fact, the dot-coms were not earning, we were earning. And then I moved on to the corporate world. I ran an ISP, not corporate in that sense. This was a small company where I built an ISP, grounds up, an enterprise ISP business. And we had some very good customers like Microsoft and Network Appliance and Siemens and all of that, with presence in Bangalore, NCR, Hyderabad. And then while I was doing this, I was, sucked into some other businesses like food processing. And
Wow.
so I did build a food processing plant where we used to export gherkins globally. US, Russia, Europe. So then there was a floriculture business which was also in Africa. So I got exposure to Africa. I used to travel quite a bit to Kenya and Ethiopia. We had a base in Netherlands, because Netherlands is the world's largest flower aggregation market. So that gave me global exposure, and that's when I went to INSEAD in 2012. I was itching to do something. I was a manager, but somewhere I had not done a formal management education. I was very keen to do something, and went to INSEAD. That's where me and Mayuresh, my partners, met. So I spent a year. It was not a full-time course, but it was on campus. A few sessions in Singapore, France, different parts of India. They used to have this session. It was a wonderful experience. I came back, and while I was doing this, I quit my job, and I was already looking at the startup ecosystem, the way it was growing, and this time I thought it is it is more stable, because already companies like Google and Facebook and all were getting built out of US, and in India it was still early days. Flipkarts of the world were coming up. So this I'm talking about 2013, and so after I quit and completed this, I started engaging with some companies just to help them. Not necessarily startups to start with, but companies in the IT infra space whom I understood well, and help them scale up, kind of. So when sit on their board and support them, advise them, including things like fundraising and all that. And so while seeing that, I did make a couple of investments also. And one was a Singapore-based data analytics company, and then I made a very small investment into a company called the Ayurveda Experience.
Hmm.
While the Singapore company did well for some time, raised capital, I would say they did not go all the way. They've been there, doing their work. But Ayurveda Experience did very well. They they probably raised a Series C or so recently. So they started as a Ayurveda content company, but they,
Got into manufacturing.
got into Ayurveda products, largely selling in the US market. And largely what you look for in a company, the founder, he was from ISB, he was an ice setter. I also used to be an ice setter in my college days in Bangalore. So, found what he was doing interesting and saw that he should be able to build it. And fortunately, it's done well. So, that kind of, led to this, the startup bug, I'll call it, because we still feel that what we do is like, we are ourselves a startup, right?
Yeah.
And that is when we said, so the idea was not to really create a venture fund. The idea was, how do you support founders? One thing I realized, and having been part of building these businesses, which I did in my journey, is that building a company is not something you can do by just being a technology expert, which is important. You need to have a 360-degree view of businesses.
Yeah.
You need to understand other components of the business also very well. And which, fortunately, I was able to learn and, demonstrate in my journey. So I thought that is the value I can bring to the table, But how do you do this? How do you engage with startup founders? Because they are not somebody who are in a position to pay you for this. And so I said, one way is to probably we give them some capital and also, help them in this. So it started with that thought process, and so that is where we said, a lawyer friend said, you want to do something like this, then why don't you do a small fund? That will be a more structured way, regulated way of doing things. So that is where the idea came up in 2016.
Got it.
But by the time we implemented it and started investing, it was 2018.
And this is the first fund.
The first one was a small fund. It was registered as probably one of the early angel funds, but the way it operated was very different from what
You operate now.
the angel funds operate now.
That was an angel fund.
Yeah, it was an angel fund. It was a Cat 1 subcat angel fund, but we operated like a blind pool where our investors came on board. Fortunately, we had Kerala Startup Mission also as an institutional investor coming in to invest in a greenfield early stage fund, which was very exciting. And we went on to invest in about 14 companies. So our core theme was around technology. We were, Deeptech was very early days, but some of our companies there also could qualify to be in the Deeptech space. So that is how the journey started. And we took our time, both in raising capital and investing. I think by the time we were done investing with this fund was 22.
And then fund 2.
And then we started working on fund 2. We got the approval in 22. We did a very quick first close in end of 22. But then the real work started, investing and all, by April of 23.
Got it. Many sir, this is a great primer. I think आपने 80% चीजें about the fund already cover कर ली है यहाँ पे. I want to understand a little bit about because I think from what I understand, you are there and Mayuresh is there, right? Are there any other partners?
So it started with me and Mayuresh, and we certainly had a group of advisors who supported us, in our journey. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Vishwanathan. He's a very senior banker, ex-ING Vaisya, Kotak, sits on board of multiple companies. He came on early on as an advisor and actually went on to invest in the fund.
Oh, wow.
He liked what we were doing, and then we had Jay Chandran Pillai supporting us, Ajay Shan, a friend of mine, came in as an LP. Jay Chandran was also a good close friend who runs a very successful company called Alp Consulting,
Mm.
which is half owned by a Japanese conglomerate called Outsourcing Inc. So these were the people who also supported us in our journey, both as investors and in many other ways. They were part of the evaluation team. And, initially, they came with deep experiences in different areas. And then Fund 2, we onboarded Narendra Bhandari, a very senior IT professional, ex-Intel, Microsoft, also part of Intel Capital. Last he worked with was Persistent and Sirocco, I guess, Rohan Murthy's company for some time. So, I've known him for some time and then persuaded him to join us. Very closely associated with NASSCOM, was part of the NASSCOM Deeptech club early on.
So how different is it raising as a founder and raising as an investor? Because investors also raise, right? वो LP से उठाते हैं. So how do the equations differ? मतलब of a startup founder raising from an investor versus an investor raising from an LP.
Sometimes my view is that raising capital as a startup is easier than raising capital as a fund. Till you have become like 3 funds old and you have had enough success stories to talk about. Because a good startup founder who has a background, or sometimes even not background, a solid idea, good, if you're a tech founder, good technology background, today there is, and it has become easier over the years. I would not say it's always been easy, and has plethora of options. And investors are also looking at opportunities. But yes, I would not say it's a cakewalk. They need to connect to the right people. Sometimes that becomes difficult, the reach, the right people. But today investors are quite reachable. They are in events, they are in various programs, they are associated with incubators, accelerators. So access has increased over the years a lot. So I would say, as a startup founder, it's a bit easier, but doesn't mean everybody will be able to raise capital. Because there are, large number of businesses and ideas who probably don't qualify in that category. So which people sometimes have to become aware of. It's a harsh reality. Sometimes you are doing Me Too businesses, thinking that this will work, or you're just trying to follow. So, say you are in a tier 2 or tier 3 city, which we are able to do a lot of good work, but we also see that they try to build or copy a business which has worked in, say, a tier 1 city or somewhere else in the world. So the capability to take it, all India, global sometimes becomes difficult. So where investors are very, careful when they look at these things.
So, just wanted to understand a little bit on the investment process or philosophy in general. I think आपका background tech में रहा है. You have been very active in tech. You understand tech very, very well. Probably that is the reason why you started off with tech as one of your thesis areas. Or plus, of course, tech has had the scalability quotient as well, right? कि tech की businesses scale आसानी से कर जाती हैं, relatively, again with an asterisk marks point. I get that, but 80% of the businesses usually, which are at least tech focused. Again, इसमें भी ये गलत बोल रहा हूँ मैं समझ गया. While I was speaking, I realized कि नहीं, this is a wrong statement. But what I'm trying to get at is, you understood tech. Then you went one step deeper and you said that not tech, I want to do deep tech. As an investor, somebody who is responsible for somebody else's money and giving them value, deep tech is one of the most ambiguous industries to be a part of when you talk about surety. Why deep tech?
So I would say it's part of the evolution process, right? So just to, because you said tech. So tech is certainly, when you talk about startup ecosystem, technology is what comes to mind. Because the maximum investments have happened in technology. Even consumer investments have happened in e-com, consumer internet is also technology driven.
Yeah.
But then to drive those businesses, technology is only an enabler.
Yeah.
There's a huge physical play there, right? And some of the businesses which have raised large number of money are in. So we have nothing against those businesses. We feel probably some of those businesses will still give you the best returns in like consumer businesses. But the reason why we didn't look at them is one, we felt we probably may not understand them that well. And the other thing is the capital required was much more. Sometimes technology, especially enterprise tech, you can support with, not that, they may not need, sometimes they go through a difficult phase also. You can support them with little bit of capital and they can survive. They can, and we have seen examples of such companies moving into cash break-even situations from a difficult situation with very little capital, which probably is not so easy in consumer companies. But personally, as an angel investor, I have invested in some consumer businesses. Ayurveda experience, I told you, but there are a few others which I have invested in. So I'm not against them. But now we're taking a question of why start with technology. So I would say when we started, deep technology was not even something which there was some work happening on it. But as the situation evolved, I mean, even when we started this fund, second fund in end of 22 to today, so I would say the investing, sometimes the landscape itself has changed. Today, if you see the government's focus on deep tech is huge. The whole ecosystem has evolved. Today, to do a lot of work, see, IT, largely we were playing around software, either as an enabler or as a core technology. And on the core technology side, software, SaaS, enterprise SaaS was a big game, building in India for the world. So that was happening. But we invested in a robotics company in our fund one called Gen Robotics, which, where just kids out of college who have built a wonderful product and built something which was not there. I mean, I would qualify them as deep tech, though it is not just, it is not necessarily just AI or something. There was a lot of use of mechanical stuff, mechatronics, hydraulics and all of that. But with the use of technology, IT and everything, they built a wonderful product to eliminate scavenging. And they have gone on to build some great products in medtech, robots for spinal injury rehabilitation. They just launched one for children. So there are these companies who have done great work. So as we started looking at the ecosystem, we realized that things like semiconductor is going to become very important with the requirement, with AI growing, with the requirement of computing power, and with Narendra coming on board, and understanding that in that space also, became better and grew. Then we also realized the EV ecosystem, right? So we made some investments in like the founder sitting here is from a company called Swap Design, which, is building a robotic, swapping station, which will be like a vehicle will come to your swapping station and a four-wheeler, and within 2 minutes, a robot will go remove the battery and put it back. And they have actually demonstrated the technology, though they have not yet built the full-scale product. Similarly, we have invested in a drone logistics company called Redway, which they build their own technology and software stack and everything, but they're trying to deliver, use that not for selling their drones, but for, moving stuff. Right now, more focus on healthcare logistics, and they're moving into other areas. We have invested recently in a company called Consent.ai. They are working in fraud detections in insurance and medical industry. Which is a SaaS play, but very, very important, with the way healthcare industry is growing, insurance industry. We have not yet announced. We have two investments which will be announced soon. One in semiconductor and one in space tech. Again, very interesting companies building space, space is a very good example. There have been some early bets which people took, but the sector opened up in 2020. But last couple of years has seen huge activity. With the government itself announcing a fund of 1,000 crores for space side.
Yeah.
So we have seen the growth of these deep technology businesses, with a lot of work happening. And actually it will enable, I was recently at IIT Roorkee sometime last year. I was actually telling the students there, now there's no need for you to look for jobs in software.
Yeah.
See, people from every stream will look for jobs in software. That has been the trend. But now the way work is happening in the EV ecosystem, the space ecosystem, materials across different areas, So there's a lot of opportunities with people with various other streams to get into those areas. I'm sure that the course infrastructure also has to improve a lot at the college level. I'm not well versed with what is happening there, but probably because on the software side it's easier to adopt.
Software is much easier. The barrier to entry is much more interesting.
So, all this has enabled, and you see actually a lot of work happening. You go to IIT Madras, you go to Indian Institute of Science, you go to IIT Bombay. Work happening in software is now anyway there everywhere.
Yeah.
It is part of everything, but work happening in medtech, health tech, all these areas is a lot.
But मुझे एक बात बताओ, so you work across the ecosystem, right? आप incubators के साथ भी काम कर रहे हो, आप angel networks के साथ भी काम कर रहे हो, आप angels, you're working with syndicates, you're working with VCs, other VCs as well. There has always been in the lower side R&D, in the R&D space, there will always be products which are made as pilots, as MVPs. Especially colleges, there are robotics club, a lot of people do a lot of stuff. But when you really talk about quality, 80% of them are substandard. And number one, the seriousness of people, especially when they're a little bit young and when it comes to technology, बहुत लोगों की वो अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं होती है. प्लस especially when it comes to deep tech, a lot of founders would only be techies. तो उनको business understanding नहीं होती. And this is one of the biggest challenges which we have seen in our community, because techies, because they have the skill set, they build. But then when it comes to selling, it becomes a challenge for them. So, what is your perspective on this? And usually, your deep tech startups that you're seeing right now, the ones who are either in your vicinity or people whom you're evaluating right now, but what kind of trends are you looking at in this book?
So I agree with you. I mean, a lot which is happening on the ground is not really very, something which will change the world really, and which will probably not see the light of the day.
But that has always been the case.
But that is fine. What happens in colleges, in clubs and all is different. The moment you go to incubators, it is one level above. But then see, as VCs, we are engaged there, but not necessarily, we get invested at that stage. So what the idea is to more see what is happening there. So, I'm part of a couple of...
Saatchi Connect is one of your partners.
Saatchi Connect, we are also invested, but that's more a platform play.
The Deeptech accelerator platform. Yeah.
They work with funds like ours and run accelerator programs and all. That is little different. In fact, some of the companies I spoke about, Swap Design and all, we found through Saatchi Connect.
Yeah, they're very good.
But these are amazing. These founders are very experienced founders. Part of companies, build products and all that. So incubators not necessarily see students going in building companies. So if you see even IIT incubators, the the companies are not necessarily just students. In fact, that gives them
That I did.
that gives a platform to the students to work with these companies,
Oh.
since they are based inside these companies. So colleges provide them the infra and the support, but these are founders who are coming from outside. And I would say that there is this Government of India seed fund, the startup seed fund, the DST, PIRAC, and various ministry supports, state government level supports, which is there to help them to build that initial product. And I think government understands that everybody will not be coming out. So the failure rates at that stage will be very high. And the idea is, how does it change from a stage to stage? Naturally, at the early investment stage, it is higher. Then you come to the next stage, it comes lower and lower, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, the multiplier is higher and higher.
Yeah.
So I think this capital today, a very good amount of capital is available from various institutions. I know government supported, sometimes even private, but mostly government, to build products, to test them, and sometimes we as VCs also get engaged in evaluating, because they want the VC perspective also, right? When they select. And sometimes I have seen that they try to bring businesses which are not really innovating, but maybe doing some revenue. So I'm very clear, you should be looking at businesses where there's real innovation. So sometimes that is where the experience comes into play, understanding of what is happening in different parts of the world. Also, what is India context, and like expecting great foundational models in AI being built in India may not be the right thing to do. Similarly, so we have to understand, where do we stand? We are very good on the applications space, but now things like, with huge support from the government, semiconductor is getting a huge push. AI as an application play is getting a huge push. So a lot is happening in these areas, and we tend to, work very closely, and, the filtering process is very important for us. I mean, we sometimes look at hundreds of companies in a month, and we may not even find one to take to the next stage. Or sometimes you find, but they may not be suitable in various ways.
Give me an example of a company or an idea that you saw which was very good, but which you thought, "Okay, is my product market fit, my problem aayegi," and the other way around as well.
We were looking at an enterprise SaaS company which actually had built a decent product, and were also probably having decent early traction. But what we were not sure of, what we were not convinced, was the scale it can go to. They were in the purchase automation or some space, and so if we feel that this cannot reach the desired, because I also have to look at whether this company, will there be investors putting the next round of capital? That is the most important part for us. So if they are able, though we may also follow on, but if there is a new investor ready to put a larger check, so their mindset is also very important for us. Some of the investors, they look at companies, the way they look at it, can it become $100 million revenue business? Which is important for us also. At our stage, it is more difficult to evaluate, but sometimes we may look at a company which is, we feel is a great technology, probably may not build the revenue base to that level, but may become a very good acquisition play. Sometimes you may take those chances, but revenue ultimately is very important for us, whether they can reach those scales.
So tell me, so you talk about two things. One is the failure rate, and second is the scalability. So I'll come to both of these. For an investor, I think Seafund has already done 14 to 15 investments from his Fund 1.
14 from Fund 1.
14 from Fund 1, and currently Fund 2 is
about 10 odd from...
Around 25 odd investments have already been done. कैसा रहा है सर आपका experience अभी तक investments का? Because I'm asking from a fact that not every startup that you put in money becomes a success, right? So how do you people do the balancing act here? Because It's Pareto's principle for investors. कि आपको 80-20 ही करना होता है. एक तो 20% will give you 80% of the results. How do you take that back? And how nerve-wracking is it for you guys to put in those kind of chunks of money to one person and say कि भाई ये मेरा bucket में इतना ही है, इसमें लगेंगे.
Yeah, so see, we all have theses and rules and some ideas.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like, a written principle which you can follow, right? That when we invest in a company, we expect every one of them to be that winner. Right?
Yeah.
So, whichever company we have invested in, mostly, see, sometimes at the later stage of the fund, you may take bets which are little safer, which is the company's little advanced, because you have less time. So you feel from here, if it's already doing well, maybe another 3 to 5x from here should be fine. But that is not what you normally look at. So the companies you look at investing, you expect every one of them to be a fund return.
Yeah.
So if you get 2 of them or 3 of them out of your 15 or 20, at least you would have returned 2 or 3 times of your fund. That is how you look at. Doesn't mean you will always get, but we were a bit conservative in our fund one. We did see some companies which went on to do very well.
Unexpectedly.
They were very risky too. But at the same time, those were a couple of cases, but there were many which we said no to. Wonderful founders, not bad idea, but somewhere something didn't look good and they didn't do well. They did not raise money. So somewhere you feel, yes, you did take the right decision. And sometimes you don't see many things, right? You don't see everything. And we were small those days. And today we see certainly many more deals than we saw those days. And then it has to fit into your stage, your valuation perspective. Like, recently we looked at an AI deal, which we felt was good, but the valuation did not work for us. For that stage, they had flipped to the US, they had Y Combinator come in, and, it when we left a couple of Y Combinator deals in Fund 1 in 2021, and they didn't work.
What's your take on Y Combinator in general as a concept now? In today's times, in 2025.
So I would follow Y Combinator very closely, but we do look at
Y Combinator.
See, one challenge with Y Combinator companies from an Indian fund perspective is they make them all registered in the US. It's not very easy for us to invest in those companies. They've done a good job, so they've been there for so long. And probably they understand that everybody will not do well.
From a value perspective, do you think it's just the tag, or is it actually
that probably the founders will tell you better.
No, but you have evaluated deals from YC startups and all. Is the quality better than the usual ones which you find, or is it कि same ही है बस मतलब लगा हुआ है?
See, I would say I would not say they are bad. They're good founders, but then the ones we see otherwise are also sometimes even better.
Yeah,
sometimes
exactly
even better. But some of them may not even have gone to Y Combinator. Probably the way Y Combinator goes about its process may be very different. For some experienced founders, they probably don't want to go that way. So, like Swap Design, maybe he could have gone to, I don't know if he applied, but I've never asked him, but probably he would have got selected. But whether it is right for him, but they also see, I have to give 7% equity for this much money. There are advantages, there are disadvantages. I think it's a founder's call ultimately, but they have done a good work over the years. We have to acknowledge that.
The brand itself has become bigger than the process, the way I look at it.
Could be.
And it's not wrong, it's not bad as well. I think it gives a validation layer for a lot of people. जैसे वो था ना IIM का tag जैसे Y Combinator वाला tag हो गया.
So there was this recent survey of IIT graduates startups by IITians and the ones who have reached certain stage, that there seems to be a majority of them, but we are seeing more and more otherwise.
मतलब ये तो सर कॉजालिटी मतलब कॉज एंड अफेक्ट वाली चीज है कि is it because these people got an opportunity that they became successful, or they are successful because they went to that college? But that's
very difficult. So some of the experienced guys, because they were from IIT and they did get into good companies and they did a good job, they came back. So nothing against them, but we have seen people from other, but that number is much huge. Maybe the percentage as that number, percentage of that.
Yeah. But is there a bias in the startup ecosystem?
There is a little bit, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong about it. I mean,
validation filter.
That filtering process of getting into an IIT is so huge. Now, whether from a technology perspective, yes, they probably they went through that drill. But whether they are the best, there's no reason. I mean, there can be a guy who didn't go to college also can, they can do it.
That's not a mandatory requirement. आजकल तो खैर मतलब things have changed.
So for us, it is not a filter. It is not that I will not look at a company if there's no better founder. But yes, if there is one, we don't mind. There's nothing.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things, because I myself am from IT, the alumni base makes a lot of difference.
Yes. And they are able to, get that support from that. Some of the other colleges don't have that, except some are there, but large number of colleges.
नहीं मतलब सर देखो मैं बता रहा हूँ इंडिया में IT, IIM, ISB. These are the only three which have a good alumni network, and probably to an extent XLRI or NITs में probably NIT Trichy has a good network. इसके अलावा ज़्यादा कुछ है?
I am from this college BMS, which is one of the oldest colleges, the India's first private engineering college. We do have an alumni association, all of that, but I think the alumni network is not very well managed. Can do if they do a good job, I'm 100% sure there are BMS sites sitting in best of companies too.
ये तो आप बात बिल्कुल सही बोल रहे हो. Okay, I think if you actually go and map, then probably you will not find that much of a difference in the distribution. It's just that these people are well connected, much better well connected than the others.
My own daughter went to BMS and then she worked with McKinsey for 2 years. Now she is at IIM. So, it's not that, only IITians get into McKinsey or, get into IIM. So there are people from all over. But somewhere, that alumni network part is important.
I absolutely agree. How many, when you people evaluate deals, how many deals do you usually evaluate on a month-on-month basis? कितने deals आते हैं? Let's look at it from that perspective. How many deals land up in your inbox usually on a month-on-month basis?
So in our fund inbox, I'll say not necessarily on email, but through various sources, probably 300 to 500
per month
deals per month.
Wow!
And some of them come through partners we work with. They send you these bulk deals. So, which good thing is they're a bit curated to some extent, but then we have some initial filters which would probably bring them down to 30, 40, and then we talk to them.
Correct. So ये management cycle, how do you people operate via emails? That's a standard practice in the investment community.
So we use some tools to manage the deal flow process. But the communication as of now is...
What kind of tools are these? These are standard tools used by all VCs or you people?
So there are many of them, and I think we've been using something called Pipedrive or something.
Okay.
But there are many tools available which one can use. And But then, sometimes you have to go to good old Excel.
Excel, nothing beats Excel.
Sometimes,
Excel is always a backup.
Google Sheet or whatever, that is linked to your email, and quick reference point sometimes works. So we sometimes do parallel process also.
Got it. But referrals usually get preference. Always. That is what I have got a general consensus from the other investors as well. What do you think? What's
Referrals
it?
make a difference. So see, referrals a lot of times come with some validation. Right? Doesn't mean that. So if we see a good deal
Floating around.
from other sources, and sometimes we know of a deal and we go reach out also. So it is like we also seek. We also go and try and connect when we hear about a good company. We also connect. But referrals do. If a deal comes from a fellow VC or even from somebody in the ecosystem or even outside the ecosystem. See, one thing we have seen, you engage with so many people. I mean, your advisors, chartered accountants, sometimes even they send deals. Because today the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem is all pervasive. It's all over the place. Today, every chartered accountant is working with startups. So even they send deals. I would not say we give any preference, but some of them would send one deal once in a while. So you will at least look at it. Now, if it doesn't fit into our thesis and concept, we will tell them, In some cases, we'll, do a call. So it is very case to case, but yes. But from the ecosystem, a reference makes.
What is the weirdest place that you have gotten a referral or a startup from? Out of the blue, you found a startup which made absolute sense for your portfolio. ऐसा कुछ हुआ है? कभी हुआ है? Or is the usual?
So, I mean, weirdest, I don't know, but for example, once I got a deal from a reference from my wife, some cousin somewhere, who got to know that, and this founder was coming to Bangalore. I had no idea. I said, "Arey, usko startup ke baare mein." And this I'm talking about early days when it was the startup ecosystem was not so. And the founder was in Bangalore, and it was a weekend, and I actually said, "Ki chalo reference aaya to." I called him home because it was on the way, and I met him, and we went on to invest, and it is one of our good deals.
Wow!
So not only unexpected quarters the deal came from, but very good founder, and it's one of our good investments. So yeah, you have to take everything seriously. So it's a learning कि कोई reference आए तो उसको कम से कम देखो. Sometimes you would not even look at.
But how much of the deals are gut based, and how much of the deals are statistics or numbers based for you?
See, I would say the gut is important, but doesn't mean that based on the gut I go and close the deal. Statistics and numbers will still come into play. Suppose I'm talking to a founder, or I met somebody somewhere, and looks good to me, and we feel each other, we should evaluate this. But then we will do our deep diligence. That is why we are not very comfortable with these all. On the TV programs, they come and say, write a check. We said we can't do that. So we still have to do our process and things like that. So while that may get you to evaluate it, and a lot of times we have said no, which look good at the face of it. We have said no later on. Right or wrong is a different thing, but And sometimes I've seen that, I met a founder, I think 2 years back in Abu Dhabi, and I had a good conversation. I liked the founder. He said, "I'm not raising capital, probably maybe later sometime, and it was early stage deal. we went on to invest recently, which we announced, was because when we realized he's raising capital, we did our evaluation. In fact, they had already taken money from one VC and then evaluate, and we decided to invest, after a thorough evaluation.
What's the due diligence process like for Seafund? कैसे चलता है मतलब compliances? Have there been instances where you've caught founders lying about the numbers or any kind of technology that they said there were? And अगर होता भी ऐसा तो implications क्या हैं इसके? Is that news spread around in the ecosystem या फिर you people say कि नहीं यार ठीक है हमारे लिए नहीं है तुम जाओ किसी और के पास? How does that work?
So for us, there has been deals which we have said no to after the diligence process or during the diligence process, after agreeing to invest. They may have been for various reasons, like, sometimes just for compliance issues which can be corrected. Since these are early stage founders and we feel that compliance is very critical.
Yeah.
Not just for us, but for them too. As they continue to grow, it will become more and more critical. And it is better that they correct it today.
Yeah.
So we ensure that. But to the extent it is possible to correct, if there is something which cannot be corrected and will involve some huge process, then we have sometimes said no, but 1 or 2 times. But otherwise we get that corrected. And today, a lot of things do get corrected, because these are still companies which are not very old. Most cases, some cases they have, like semiconductor is one space where companies are very old. They were services and now they have moved to product. The other thing is we have said no because sometimes, when we do deep, so we, besides compliance, financial and all of that, we also do a deep dive into the product, the technology and all of that. So we sometimes find that what has been claimed may not be there, may not be true. Or it is not that the founder is lying, sometimes that is their understanding. We have understood it differently. We felt it is something, out of the world, and then when we go, we feel there's not much of a differentiation. Sometimes it is business plan. Sometimes founders just don't understand numbers. The business plan they present initially is very different, and when we do a deep dive, you realize that the business plan, the funding which we are talking about doing may not even work for them. Like there was a case where we saw that, from a profitability of some sort, it was like a negative number when we corrected the business plan of a huge number, which the funding round will not even take care of year one.
Wow.
So now in that situation, first of all, the whole dynamics change, right? The valuation, the requirement, whether this business is even viable, all that changes. Plus the money itself is not good enough. So, in those situations, we have said no. But yeah, the percentage of no's after you have agreed is lower naturally than,
Got it, but in the startup ecosystem in general, there is a lot of FOMO. Investors के लिए FOMO क्यों होता है? Why does FOMO, and this is a lot of FOMO investment also happens, right? क्या है मतलब? What's your take? Why does it happen? मेरे को पहले वो समझा. Why do investors get into a FOMO for investing in a certain company? और ये तो मैन्युफैक्चर्ड फोमो होता है आजकल तो आधे से ज्यादा. बट हाँ प्लीज.
क्या होता है कि आप देख रहे हो एक डील कोई अच्छे इन्वेस्टर ने किया है. समटाइम्स फोमो डील का होता है, समटाइम्स सेक्टर का भी होता है. मतलब नॉट जस्ट द ब्रॉड सेक्टर बट द से लेट्स फॉर एग्जांपल लेट्स से रॉकेट. स्पेस इज ब्रॉड राइट, बट स्पेस में रॉकेट है. तो अब रॉकेट की कंपनीज दो ने बहुत पैसा रेज कर लिया, तो फिर इन्वेस्टर को लगता है अरे इसमें हमको भी घुसना चाहिए. समटाइम्स दे ट्राई टू एंटर दैट कंपनी एट अ लेटर स्टेज एंड समटाइम्स दे लुक फॉर समथिंग सिमिलर. बट यू हैव टू बी केयरफुल दैट. आई हैव लर्नड दैट यू हैव टू बी केयरफुल इन एंटरिंग. सी जो चल गया डजंट मीन कि हर कोई चलेगा. And some of these rocket companies, they've raised a lot of capital and they're very capital intensive, but there is still a journey till they finally, build a rocket which does the job it is supposed to. Not saying it will not happen, might happen. Is the valuation justified? I don't know. I don't think so. But then probably they need so much of capital कि if you don't value them at those levels, the founders may be left with nothing. So that could be the reason, because when they started early, they've diluted a lot. Because that time you are just talking some story. So that time nobody will give you very high valuation. Then as you go ahead in the journey, you are so much diluted. So then the valuation numbers change a lot. So I think the FOMO comes from that. When you see some sector, then there's sectoral FOMO like AI. People want to be in AI. Sometimes they choose anything and everything. So you have to be careful. Yeah.
But in general, transporting hoti kaise? How does, because I think investors are the first ones to identify a trend and put money on it. Because, of course, they will make multiples, higher multiples only when they spot something early. लेकिन ये ट्रेंड स्पॉटिंग होती कैसे? Are there numbers to back it, or it's usually hearsay? Somebody is putting in money.
Sometimes it is driven by, I would say, what's happening, new developments in a space, right? For example, AI. It happened after the OpenAI came into play, right? Yeah. AI has always been. In fact, some of the companies who have raised capital a lot more after OpenAI came into play, they were there already. Some of these companies were there, they had a product, they were doing automation. That time we were calling them automation, ML and all that, like all this voice, AI and chat and all that was there. OpenAI kind of the conversational AI piece and all has evolved to the next level because of these new developments. I would say generative AI became a huge place. So that gave a huge boost to that whole sector. So then you start looking at things which are, but there is a lot of noise around it. So you have to be careful also. Okay, what will work? So we are very careful. So we have not gone and openly bet on AI. We have bet on spaces which are using that as a technology, but they have much more. They are using generative AI more as a tool, but they are doing much more, right? Than just that piece. So I think, and see, then every trend has some genesis, right? Semiconductor has been there in the US, in India it has been a services play on the software side more. But then suddenly there was this big push from the government, with the design linked incentive for design company. So a lot of semiconductor services guys who were working for bigger players, they had the experience, the knowledge and all, they moved to chip design. And then there's this focus on, the fab side also, which government. So that whole support system has to get created, right? And with the growth of PLI in electronic manufacturing, the mobile ecosystem, Apple's growth in India, all that has enabled this, because we all realize
market has opened up and there is the supply side.
So that certainly the startup ecosystem then also starts playing its role. So every sector has some genesis. Space, I would say, is largely driven by the opening up in 2020 of the space sector and a couple of initial success stories. It's again a very large sector. Even globally, it's not that there are too many players were there. It's only now. So we all have heard of the US guys, SpaceX. But there is a huge opportunity which people are seeing. Now, whether everybody will be successful is to be seen. But people have been able to build some products. And yes, sometimes the challenge is the valuation numbers. Sometimes when the sector comes into limelight, that, and a lot of times it's driven by investors also. They go and, with the FOMO factor, go and offer very.
नहीं क्योंकि इसमें दो तीन एग्जांपल्स हैं because I also have been a part of the startup ecosystem since 2013 2014. उस टाइम पे तो खैर चीजें बहुत ही नहीं थी, इवन द इन्वेस्टर्स वर लर्निंग. आई थिंक दो तीन ऐसे फैक्ट्स आए हैं जिसमें बहुत पैसा डूबा है. एक था एडटेक विच
उसके पहले इवन इकॉम. See, ecom में आप success stories we all know, but we don't know many who failed, and some who raised good amount of capital also failed. So ecom, consumer
जैसे
consumer, well,
so मुझे याद है फ्लिपकार्ट के टाइम पे there was another one जो कि जंबो इंटरनेट नेटवर्क है ना, उसका नाम भूल गया मैं.
even ये जो था मित्रा जैसा एक और था, Jabong. And there are so many others. I would not say Snapdeal also was not
a proper CC firm.
Snapdeal was also not a success. I mean, investors didn't make a lot of money, but a lot of people probably got into Snapdeal because of the FOMO factor. Probably. Amazon anyway is more like a conglomerate coming and entering, so that is different. And Flipkart itself acquired many. So, Myntra and all that, many got acquired. They were, there was one which there were multiple niches, then Lime something, Lime Road or
Lime Road.
There's so many who have raised like 30, 40, 50 million dollars. It's not small money and failed. Many are there.
I think 13, 14, 15 के time पे तो investors were also trying and testing ना. उस टाइम तो देखते थे कितने चेक्स दिए जा रहे हैं versus
many in the home services space which probably didn't raise that much money.
Taskbop और वो सारे अर्बन क्लैप वाला पूरा का पूरा इंडस्ट्री.
Even urban company probably
was the only one to
survive, and actually pandemic enabled. Probably without pandemic, I don't know. I've not followed them very closely, but pandemic was a good enabler for them.
Very interesting. Q-commerce के बारे में क्या लगता है सर आपको?
We all have had. I'm not. So I'm a user.
Of course, everybody is
driven by the need. But I sometimes feel that is it the best thing? I mean, it is certainly disrupting the local stores. Like earlier, I would go down to. I stay in a large community to the shop inside. There was a vegetable fellow. Now you have so much convenience, and for one small delivery, there's one vehicle coming all the way. It's probably creating jobs and convenience and all of that. Ultimately, we have to pay for it. Investors have been subsidizing it to some extent, but we'll have to pay for it. Right now, it seems to be something which has got accepted, and so good or bad, I don't know. Very initially, I was not very sure how successful it is. It will be, but then looks like it is actually disrupting the whole e-com plane, not only just for food, grocery, and which it started with, but now it is getting into everything. Like I ordered a blanket yesterday because I had to give it to somebody, so ordered a couple of blankets on quick commerce.
I think Blinkit.
Gold.
Blinkit has basically started now doing ambulances in 10 minutes. Anything in 10 minutes. Basically, that's the whole game.
Some of this, like pharma, is one play which
pharmacy is
pharma they will try and do, and pharma is possible because you have pharmacies nearby, or they can set.
Swiggy is already doing that now with pharmacy. They've already launched. They've already started. But नहीं, but इसमें सर पूरा का पूरा गेम ही उनका नॉन ग्रोसरी वाला है ना Q-commerce में तो. I think the margins are only there in the tech. One.
Because grocery is something which will attract you initially. Because food is one item.
80% of the distribution.
You need the raw material immediately or something. Pehle, people were buying small quantities, but now people are open to buy larger quantities. So, large number of items. I was in Dubai a couple of months back, and was meeting
Dubai में क्यों commerce चल रहा है?
quick commerce. I'm not sure, but all the investors, I met so many people who either have invested or keen to invest in some of these companies. So Swiggy and Zomato is not a problem. One was getting listed, one was already listed, but they were all, looking at putting money in Zeptos and I don't know how Big Basket is doing. And
Consolidate होगा सर ये market भी. But see, for the initial days, any industry basically goes through this cycle, right? So there one or two big ones, there are a lot of copycats and smaller players will come in, then there will be a consolidation which will happen.
I believe Flipkart has started or starting.
Flipkart Minutes has already started. Yeah, Flipkart Minutes has already started. Amazon has also started now. But I can select cities. And Blinkit and Swiggy are now innovating. Now, in the other industries, what used to happen was smaller companies would open up, one or two companies will get a lot of funding and they will start acquiring. Same happened with the Ola and Taxi for Shop case. Same happened in the whole edtech ecosystem where there were only two giants remaining, Byju's and an academy. And now, but here in the q-commerce space, every player is a big player. So consolidation though is a little bit difficult. It's going to be a very interesting fight where the consumer wins. But probably the VCs might lose a lot of money.
Probably it's a large enough space in India. See, I think one is probably the Kirana guy with those.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the space may be large enough to have probably 3-4 players.
Yeah.
3-4 large players. Now, I don't know if there will be a separate specialized play in this. Like, will somebody become, like, we have already pharma.
Vertical.
Now, will they themselves become...
Apollo has already started doing 20-minute deliveries. Yeah.
Polo was anyway, I've been using them. They were anyway able to do for a couple of hours. And 2-3 hours they were doing. Sometimes availability there is a challenge because pharma has products which rare, so which sometimes you cannot keep everywhere. Other than those, I think the regular ones,
over the counter medicines तो generic ही आजकल निकल जाएंगे सर, तो very interesting. But I think यहाँ से I think Q-commerce से I would want to take a little bit of a detour towards AI because वो Deeptech और tech के अंदर में भी आ जाता है. And I wanna eat your brains around AI and how do you see that space evolving because वो इतना ज़्यादा flux में है and there is so many things happening. But then I always believe there is a method to the madness and if you have a 30,000 feet view, you can actually make out कि यार ये चीजें तो at least होंगी. जैसे AI में मुझे लगता है कि the foundational elements, of course, the way business or work happens will probably change fundamentally. But the needs will always remain the same. We always overestimate the change which is gonna happen in the short term and underestimate the change which happens in the long run. So मुझे तो ये लगता है सर कि AI में भी चीजें बदलेंगी और सारी चीजों में AI आ जाएंगी लेकिन हम कर वही चीज रहे होंगे and jobs might shift basis. What do you think? What is your take on this?
So AI as a technology is there to stay. AI is not new. We all had a subject called AI, right? That we studied. But it was only
last chapter, 5 pages.
Yeah. We had actually a full subject in computer science AI. So the foundation is very old. But because of the computing power, because of what NVIDIA has been able to do, AI seems to be now evolving. So my view is, and I'm not an expert, is that the application areas are getting widened. So people are entering multiple new areas. Like it will play, till now you heard a lot about, text, video, audio, largely on the media side, but it will get into, certainly code writing and all. But now I think a lot of work is happening on the enterprise side. I was just chatting in the morning with a neighbor who's actually building a business in AI. How about tools? There are now tools on the accounting side, on the compliance side, on the audit side. So in many cases, it is able to do 95% of the job, but there are experts still required to do that final 5%, which means to review the whole thing, do it right, because you know everything cannot be standardized yet, because there is that element of deciding what category this will fall into and putting it in the right space, especially in compliance, audit, finance, banking. But it is getting into all of those areas, and more enterprises will use. So AI is here to stay. It will grow. It will create new jobs, new opportunities, and probably increase efficiencies. Increase the speed of work, like he was mentioning, something which was taking 6 to 8 weeks to do. Like we were speaking about, like in US, when you file for an IPO, you have to file various documents, various forms. Now companies are able to do that with the use of AI much faster. So AI is getting to all our lives, to all our tools, into many tools, into it's becoming part of hardware systems. It is becoming it's not just an independent software tool by itself. It is getting into everything. The way your camera will work in mobile phones, how is working today, is also the AI element will come in.
Processing and everything will become AI. Interesting. Are you people also bullish on AI as an industry? Seafund?
Yes. So we are looking at it, but we are also careful, because like it happens with anything which is all over the place, you have to be very careful in what you invest into, because there are multiple people doing multiple people in the same spaces, same areas.
So, because the reason why your perspective becomes all the more relevant is because you have gone through the 90s wala time as well, because this was very similar times.
Yeah.
Very similar times.
Then internet itself was the thing.
Yes.
Oh, how will internet help?
Yes. So now that you see AI, do you draw parallels there? कि यार ये तो उस टाइम पे भी 10 साल लगा था सेटल होने में, यहाँ पे भी 10 साल लगेंगे आपको लगता है? Do you think is it a wait and watch, or is it a now is the time when you
now
invest?
I don't think it is wait and watch. Now it is like the journey has begun. It is like now how much of it you adopt. Like we as a small organization are also thinking how we can use it more to increase our efficiency, right? As an enabler at personal level, at the organization level. But they are now AI assistants, right, to help you. Now, are they perfect? I am trying to use one of them. I'm still figuring out.
Which one? Which one are you using?
So this is a one called Fast Tracker, which is by friend's company. So I'm trying to. I got a free version right now.
Beta version.
No, it's already there in the market. So, but I'm still figuring out, because it cannot do like it helps you automate. Say if you want to write a new email to somebody, I can just say so and so. I can use it on WhatsApp. So I say write an email to so and so, for and give a brief discussion. On voice note also will work. Now, something like I have to provide the email ID if it's not already there in my database. But something like it was not able to automatically take my signature. So these are things they are fine tuning. I mean, this will happen. These are happen. So I know just setting up a calendar meeting on my calendar is. It's not that it takes too long to go and do it, but if you're able to, while driving, if I can tell my assistant, set up this meeting immediately, or take notes after a call. Just after the call finish, you forget things, to just record and say, and I know it will, put it on your
Interesting.
And so things like this, will become more and more useful for both, in different areas. I'm sure for doctors are not easy. Doctors,
Yeah.
healthcare, can also see a lot of
Diagnosis, the initial diagnosis and everything, things will change. Very interesting. आप थोड़ा सा सर पहले हम थोड़ा सा आपके wanna know a little bit about you as an individual. How does your day usually? How does a day of an investor look like?
which invest.
But आपका कैसा है? How goes your day? Is it a very hectic day, hectic schedule that you usually have, or you usually have managed to now structure your life around in such a way कि यार सारी चीजें अब खुद ब खुद हो रही हैं?
Sometimes the day is based on the stage of the fund journey you are. So I personally take my morning a little easy unless there's a prefixed meeting. I have my routine which I do, exercise and stuff like that, walk and chai and all that. I start normally a little late, but then we start with an internal call, stand up.
अच्छा.
Sometimes people have this concept of doing a stand-up meeting
Yeah,
in their offices. We do it over a call. It's supposed to be 10-15 minutes, but sometimes it goes on longer. But that's the only time we get to meet or talk, because then each one of us have our agenda. And then if I'm in Bangalore, drive down to office, which is not easy in Bangalore.
कितने दूर है सर यहाँ से अगर आप?
I'm about 10-11 kilometers, but
Wow.
takes
You come every day?
yeah,
Every day.
5 days.
But do you need to be in office? Does an investor need to be in office?
So there was a time when I would not do that, but I feel my productivity is better. It's again personal preference,
Got it.
It's better when I'm in office. And since we are located centrally, CBD, I see a lot of times it's easier to get people for meetings. I know centrally, and nothing like face to face, Sometimes it can be people from the ecosystem, myself. So I mean the time is divided and not necessarily every day, So bunch of meetings get fixed in advance, like it is with existing founders. You have board meetings, you have follow-up calls, you have investor calls, you have your own compliance-related stuff. Like within the fund, I take care of compliances also. So compliance, your advisors means your companies who support you. So we work with a lot of, partners who help us on various sides, finance, compliance and stuff like that. A lot of our activities are outsourced, so where we have not built internal teams for everything because we feel there are experts who know this better.
Absolutely.
So we rather work with them. So, but that does require coordination, stuff like that. So the day is divided, and largely across. And then when you are traveling, it's very different, right? Each travel, sometimes it's for an event, sometimes it's for meeting or
How important are events for an investor?
That's a question which I'm also trying to answer or find an answer to. So I feel there are events. So one, being in touch with the ecosystem, sometimes meeting good founders does happen. But at the same time, there are a lot of events. So you have to choose the right one. So we, sometimes after attending, we said that I could have avoided this.
But what's the intent for you to go to an event? What's the motivation? What do you look for?
Sometimes it's an obligation also. See, when somebody calls you, you're part of the ecosystem, you're obligated. But a lot of times you are expecting. See, in our business, in our ecosystem, I think meeting people, networking with other investors, with startup founders, and not necessarily only opportunities to invest in, but even founders who have made it, are very important. Because you don't realize what synergies. Maybe one of your companies can be a good acquisition target for a successful company. Sometimes it can be just learning. Sometimes it could be business development for your startup companies. So, and a lot of times, events make it easier for you to meet these people. And sometimes you don't even realize otherwise that this person can add this value till you have met. So it's not easy for you to sit in your office and think, "Arey, I should contact so and so." So events are important. But yeah, which ones to go to, since there are so many of them, you can't be everywhere, so you have to be.
Got it. Got it. And one, I think, as we come closer towards the end of the podcast, I want to go a little bit deeper on the kind of support that you people provide at Seafund. Because एक बार आपने पैसा डाल दिया, you also have to ensure IRR, right? How do you do that? And is there a mathematics that you have figured out around it?
So there's no mathematics around it, but we are very clear, the whole, fundamentals of a fund itself is that we are not just pure financial investor. Though on paper, as a registered fund, we are financial investor, but we will work beyond just giving money. So we try to be on board as an observer or a director on that. We certainly do regular calls with founders, and these are not just to take feedback and look at numbers. The idea is to see what is happening, if they're stuck anywhere, if we can help them in any way. So sometimes it could be, simple things like connecting them to somebody for business development, for some expertise, for fundraise, for a follow round. Could be various ways we can connect them. Sometimes it is larger discussion on product strategy, product roadmap, and things like that, where we don't impose, we do, but we try to see if we can. They sometimes want that feedback. Then sometimes companies are looking at M&A, like I was on a call yesterday with one of our companies which is looking at an M&A opportunity. When they wanted us to get involved and help them, because they feel that somewhere I've been part of M&As in the past, so I probably will be able to add that value. So we work in various ways. Sometimes we if a startup is going through a difficult phase, can we help them, in streamlining their cash burn?
Interesting.
And we have seen that happen where companies have gone from a cash burn stage to very low burn or towards positive cash flow. It's not that we made it happen, but we gave inputs which probably enabled the founder to take those sometimes difficult decisions. They also want that support system from an investor.
Absolutely.
So we try to handhold, sometimes add that value. Sometimes they just get stuck in a journey, where you need that enabler push. Not that we are able to add every time that value, but we try to do all of that.
But कितनी बार ऐसा हुआ है कि once you have put in the money, you figure out that this founder doesn't listen to me at all. And does it matter? Does it matter?
So we are very happy if a founder doesn't listen and things are going right, which is okay. Founders have a mind of their own. Only thing, if something has been discussed and agreed and then not followed, that matters. Right?
I agree.
If we have discussed and it's not agreed, it's fine. Ultimately, founders running the company, we don't want to get into the founder's shoes. But yes, that matters. What is agreed, what we have discussed should somewhere get followed. If there is a change, we'll probably come back to the table.
Interesting. And are there any things which you believe are important for founders, but very few founders actually follow them?
So one thing which is my favorite subject, I keep talking, is compliance and financial management very early on. Probably from the time you decide to, start a business. I have seen where founders have spent crores in building a product, but they don't have a company. So there's no accounting of that money. You have just paid from your personal account and you have spent money. You don't even have a company. So it's better that you do it right so that that money gets value. If it's rooted to a company, and then at the company formation stage, people do a lot of mistakes. Then there's a lot of mistakes which happen, and I don't blame just founders. The advisory ecosystem, the CA, CS, legal ecosystem, which probably they don't go. And I don't say only the expensive ones are the best. Sometimes it's not true. But, sometimes they don't get the right advisors and we have seen that a lot of effort goes into correcting those. Then, so cost of compliance is not very high if you do it right.
How do you define compliance for these founders? What do you mean by compliance?
So compliance in India, in Indian context is, whatever we have to do, and I'm talking about more on the regulatory side, not in your internal
Personal
systems and processes.
Achha.
Like, that is also important.
GST bharna sahi time pe, filing.
Forming, after you form the company, even forming the company, the way you have allotted shares, the way you have done ROC related compliances, you have got some early investor, you go and take debt from individuals, which sometimes you cannot, right? Unless the individual is part of the company or something. Then the secretarial compliances, the tax compliances, income tax probably comes much later because, but you still have to file, right? The TDS, then if you have X number of people, PF becomes very important. So TDS, PF, GST. Sometimes these, when you are short of money, you don't pay these things, but they can haunt you later. So that's why the cost of compliance is not very heavy if you do it at the right time, but can become very heavy.
But this is probably because as founders, you usually are focused completely on building the business. और आपको लगता है ये तो मेरा ideally CA संभाल लेता है ideally, but usually people don't have a good CA.
That's the problem. So plus you still have to give time. See, today you are not at that stage. You are not in a position to pay very well, and you are paying some maybe 50,000 a year to the CA. For CA, you are one more customer. So unless you have that, it doesn't take a lot of time, but you should have as part of your agenda कि ये भी करना है. One of the founders can focus on that. In many cases, you have 2 or 3 founders, or you have a team member who focus on that. But it's important.
मतलब ये क्या ये बस you're talking about updating things and making sure that they get filed.
There are
just following
there are many things as you grow in your the way you have raised capital. You early on raise capital ना, so आप individual से ले लेते हो, आप proper paperwork नहीं करते, और फिर बाद में investor आता है. Sometimes you lose on a deal because of this. I know of recently a case when an acquisition did not go through because at the due diligence stage many such gaps were found.
Very interesting.
You go and somebody advises you go and form company overseas. Then you lose. There's no harm in forming it, but you can't keep flip-flopping company. You have to do it very well. And similarly, ESOPs, people go and create MSOPs without understanding what it is and things like that.
पर ये सब सिखाने के लिए क्या, where should they go to learn these things or at least manage these things?
So I think
because a lot of people know that these are things which I don't know, but there's nobody to whom they should go.
I mean, you will have to find people in your ecosystem who probably understand this well. If you give it due importance, you will find those people.
So these are CAs you're talking about, or you're talking about financial advisors?
Largely, I would say these are CAs, they should also see that you are also interested. Sometimes,
you'll have to choose the right person.
And take the opinion when you are doing something, especially if you are doing, say, a small fundraise. from individuals, and you go and do some. There are certain things which don't work. Like people are doing the safe note agreements. India safe note, there's no concept of safe note.
India has no concept of safe note. Yeah.
People say, I've done safe. You can call it whatever. But in Indian context, it has to be an instrument which works in India.
Yeah.
Similarly, financial management. See, while you build business, you also know what are you spending. I mean, maybe early on you don't have revenue, but what are you spending? What will it result in? What revenues will you get? And when you get revenue, what are you burning? Your understanding of the burn, how much money is left in the bank? And sometimes, people realize when 2 months money, 3 months money is left, and you get stuck. So if you take action early on, you reduce your burn early on, you get that additional runway, and it works. You find that time to then reduce the burn, build business profitably. Also, sometimes if you're not able to find an investor, it's not necessary that the only way to do it is to close the business. So, you can sometimes, especially in enterprise businesses where you have some customers, you have some revenue. Say I have a 30-40 lakh revenue, and I have a business, I have a cost structure which is 60 lakhs. Now, can you bring that cost structure to that 30-40 lakhs so that you have break even till you come to a stage? I understand, to grow business, sometimes you will need more capital, but then you may not get that capital at that point, because there are difficult periods in a journey. Then you have to see you can still sustain it. The only way is not to necessarily close, because you have put a lot of effort as a founder. Though
some cost fallacy.
Fail fast is what policy people follow. But this is at a stage where you are not necessarily a failure.
Yeah,
you build the business, you have takers. You sometimes have to build that base where you can charge more, expand and all that.
I think we have come towards the end of the podcast, sir. I think there are one or two questions which I just want to understand from you. One is, as a fund, what's the future? What's the plan for 2025? What are the kind of startups that you're looking at? How many startups are you looking to invest in now? And any specific kind of profiles of startups that you're looking at which you want to invest in, please?
So we do have, as a fund, in this current fund, we want to invest in 18 to 20 startups. We've built a portfolio. So we have a small portion of the fund which is for follow-on from Fund 1 companies, very small portion. So some deals which we did in this fund are follow-on. So we've done about, including the deals underway, which we have closed but we have not announced on paper. We have about 7 which kind of are done. I'm not counting the follow-ons. So we have about another 10 to 12, probably 11 to 13 deals which we will do over the next, I would say more like 18 months. Was that
so kitna ticket size was the check size that you?
So we do up to about $500,000 first check. Up to, we can sometimes do 250, 300K, depending on the companies, at what valuation we are entering, what is the stage and all, because we do sometimes do pre-seed, but prefer seed to pre-series A. So based on factors, we do a check size like that. And sectors, so we have some focus areas within Deeptech, like, semiconductor, aerospace, mobility, material, AI SaaS. Now with AI SaaS again can be even in fintech. We have had some fintech focus, but right now I would not say we have a fintech focus, but something which fits into all of this and can be a fintech too.
What kind of multiples do you? I think Deeptech is the highest multiple hoga, nahi? I might be wrong.
Multiple in what sense?
In terms of the amount of money that they are making right now, मतलब valuation perspective, sir.
It is. So if they are making money, in some cases But I know we've been fortunate enough to get good entry deals, which I cannot share specifics, but we've been fortunate. We've been, in some cases, we have been fortunate to find them early on and do good. I mean, that is important as a fund. At what stage you find a good deal and what valuation you can enter.
Yeah.
But we are also mindful that if a founder will need to raise a lot of capital, then you have to give him her the right valuation so that they don't.
I agree. Both of it.
So that we understand.
Trading or investment में similarity है. You are a trader. You trade also in the normal market, stock market.
I don't trade. I invest little
You
bit.
invest. But do you think there is a similarity between people who are traders and people who are investors, or the strategies?
I think people who invest in public markets.
तो actually तीन बनाता हूँ मैं. हाँ, one is public market, one is poker, and one is investments. Do you see any kind of similarity between these?
I don't necessarily see clear similarities. I feel poker is not part of my understanding area, so that I think is pure. Though it's considered a skill game and is allowed and all, but I would keep that out. But from a public market within public market, people trade and invest. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of data play, a lot of analytics, you can do based on that. But long-term investors there also using data do get into companies. There also you have early stage investors, right, who invest in a company early, which is which is still on the rise. Where they sometimes big investors sometimes go meet companies. I've seen individual investors, they put a good chunk, they take a small portion of equity and then go and meet founders, do their study and all. They do that. But it's more an analytical play on the computer.
But startup funding, startup investments and normal investment
completely different. But it is something which every investor, certainly today the way our ecosystem is developed, is not for every investor, but people who have worked something, the HNI category, and with the angel ecosystem more have got exposure to it, is an asset class which people should look at. But what I see is a lot of investors want to do direct deals. That they have to be very careful. Because you don't get to see everything. And some of these platforms have the pressure of doing large number of deals. So they certainly cannot do that level of diligence. If they do that level of filtering, they will not have enough deals. So for you to, and then you are not investing as an angel investor in every of their deals. You choose something based on one call or one follow-on call, which is not easy. So if you are not, I feel startup investing is a full-time job. Even if you want to do direct investing as an angel investor, you have to deep dive.
Yeah.
Which some family offices now have built teams to do. So they do funds, they do that, which is fine, which is like they sometimes co-invest with funds. So which is fine, which is like you've built expertise or you're building expertise around it. Otherwise, for individuals, I would say careful, you work with people who understand.
In fact, I think if you don't understand the industry, you should not put in the money.
Not direct. But if you're betting on a expert, that's fine. Then you are a financial investor with somebody else is betting on. As an ecosystem, yes.
Anybody who just wants to start investing, startup investing, what is your advice for them? What should be the starting point for them?
So like I said, angel investing is a full-time job. So if you're busy with your something, you should go with a fund structure. You should evaluate a fund. Now there are many angel funds who do a blind pool concept these days also. If you don't have that ticket size of minimum 1 crore, which SEBI defines, angel funds is 25 lakhs. Or you are doing direct, there may be situations where you just bet on somebody who's a full-time investor. Go with that person, but otherwise you should go with somebody who is already
You're asking कि वो he should become a part of a network and invest via that.
नेटवर्क भी नहीं, मतलब नेटवर्क there's nothing wrong, but you should invest with somebody who is doing this
अच्छा,
full time,
full
who
time.
understands, who does
Who-
evaluation, who has a strategy around it,
Yeah.
right?
Got it.
That is where funds become important, right? You know,
So, आप लोग LPs कैसे खोजते हो? How do you people go around looking for LPs? Because it's a complete. And is it the usual timeline that a startup usually takes, or it's longer?
fundraising is a journey for a fund. I mean, you raise fund over a couple of years, right? So and you keep raising, you keep onboarding LPs, and you know, so there's a process. Also very regulated. So
Yeah.
you know, we are not allowed to advertise. We are not allowed to openly market. So
Sure.
it's a very one-on-one
Interesting.
kind of relationship. So you know, you sometimes you know, it's largely starts with your own networks and then goes into enablers, people who probably work with HNIs and family offices. Then there are institutional investors who we engage with, whom you know, who are there in the ecosystem. They have their own processes. So it's a process. I mean, some not. So
समय लगता है.
engagement with each LP, sometimes you can close an LP in 2 days. Sometimes for an institutional LP, you will take a year also.
Yeah, लेकिन एक बार once the money has been deployed, after that, do LPs need to be given updates, and how anal are they?
Very regulated. We are supposed to give quarterly updates to LPs. And then there's so many other things which we have to do, which is regulated. And we do calls with LPs. You know, some LPs certainly want to have more regular calls. Some don't have that much time, so that's case to case.
Lenny sir, I think this has been a very deep dive into the whole startup and the investment ecosystem. I think we've covered majority of the facets. Do you think anything which we have left?
Enough.
Lenny, this has been a very comprehensive and a deep dive into both Seafund, the startup and the investment ecosystem. We've got different perspective of all the different industries as well. I think wholesome है, सारी चीजें cover हो गई हैं. And I think we would like to draw this podcast to a close. Manoj sir, it has been a pleasure chatting with you.
It's been wonderful. It was free flow. You know, I enjoyed it. You know, a lot of these things just come out in a conversation.
Yes, that's the whole intent of this podcast. We really wanted very candid and
I did not realize it's being recorded.
1.5 घंटा. नहीं, but that's the beauty ना, इसीलिए तो ऐसे करते हैं ना हम लोग.